Do you have a really high emotional intelligence? Today we're going to find out. I'm going to walk you through 5 main pillars of behavior that people with a really high amount of emotional intelligence embody in their day-to-day life. And these might be things that you've been doing without even realizing it. I think we can give a lot of weight to general intelligence. You tend to know it a little bit more if you're very smart intellectually. But emotional intelligence is a little bit different. It's an entirely different beast. And sometimes this can easily get overlooked. You might have a lot more emotional intelligence than you think. Because it's not just about being nice or staying calm. Emotional intelligence kind of embodies your awareness of yourself, how you handle pressure, and how you deal with other people, especially when things get uncomfortable. So, I'm going to walk you through these 5 pillars, and I want you to take a moment to reflect on your own behavior throughout your life and see if any of these apply to you, because they might just be ones that you're doing on a day to day basis. And stick around to the end because the last one that we're going to cover is the one that most commonly gets overlooked. And the first pillar that embodies high emotional intelligence is self awareness. People with high emotional intelligence have a high level of self awareness. They have a high level of understanding of what is going on in their own head. They're able to process their own emotions in real time. So when something comes up, right, maybe something triggers them, maybe they're in a really emotionally taxing situation and there's a lot of feelings coming up. They have the ability to catch themselves in those feelings and actually put a name to it. And this is a really underrated skill because when you're able to put a name to what you're feeling, it's way easier to address it, right? It's a lot more difficult to take that on and do something about it when you have an entire flood of emotions coming in and you can't really identify what exactly they are. So you don't feel good and you act out based on that. People with really high emotional intelligence are able to actually look at and dissect what is coming up for them and why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. They may have a deeper understanding of where these feelings are even coming from, right? If something has triggered them, they may have an understanding of what childhood experiences, what went on earlier on in their life that has caused this to be a trigger for them. And they may even have the ability to recognize in real time that something that's triggering them now is not purely because of this present moment. It's because they're experiencing feelings about something that has happened years and years ago. And again, having that understanding makes it a lot easier for you to not explode in the situation and act in a way that's disproportionate to what is actually going on. The other part to this is, along with having a high level of self-awareness of what is going on in their head, people with high emotional intelligence have a high level of awareness of how their actions impact others. And so when they are interacting with other people, they have kind of a consistent practice of reflecting on how they showed up and how they communicated with others and how that may have made other people feel. They're constantly thinking about, is there ways that I could have handled the situation better? Is there ways that I maybe could have phrased what I was saying in a different way? These types of people tend to be really receptive to feedback because they're trying to learn and they're trying to be mindful of how their actions are impacting the people around them. And so anytime they're encountered with feedback, instead of getting really angry and defensive, they see it as an opportunity to grow. And again, this is kind of one of those underrated tools, generally speaking. If you are someone who consistently gets angry and defensive at the feedback that you get in your life, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to grow, right? Because I am kind of the belief that people generally are not assholes, right? I think people generally are trying to be helpful and are trying to be kind on some level. And so that's kind of the mindset I try to keep in mind when people give me feedback. Because, listen, getting feedback doesn't always feel good, right? It's a hit to your ego. It kind of knocks you down a few pegs. It kind of makes you feel a little bit of insecurity. It's understandable that can trigger anger and this outburst and defensiveness in you. So again, having the self-awareness to say, oh, I'm feeling insecure, I'm feeling kind of hurt, I'm feeling kind of annoyed, I'm feeling kind of angry, but not letting that affect your outward actions and instead saying, okay, wait, what's the opportunity here? What is this person trying to teach me? What can I take away from this in order to be a better person, right? Very, very underrated skill. And this is something that people with a high level of emotional intelligence do very, very well. And it's why they're able to continuously show up better in social situations, because they're taking that time to be mindful of how they're showing up, and they're willing to course correct and practice at this and kind of hone their skill, if you will. The second pillar of highly emotionally intelligent people is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the practice of kind of not, like, exactly what it sounds like, really, not letting your emotions take the wheel and take control over you. I think we all know somebody in our life who lacks emotional regulation as a skill. These are the people who something minor happens and they're kind of overcome with emotions. Again, this may be a situation where they're triggered, and because they don't have the tools and the skills to understand what's going on or regulate themselves or get a handle on the situation, they end up having a really disproportionate outburst in these situations and screaming at people and saying really mean things and taking these really dramatic actions instead of, taking a moment to pause and gather themselves and act in a more appropriate manner. I think we all know somebody like that. Whereas on the flip side, people with really high emotional intelligence are very, very dialed in with their emotional regulation. They have a really good ability to catch themselves in those moments and keep themselves from having these really large, disproportionate reactions. And this is not to say that these people don't feel negative emotions, right? They're human. They're gonna feel the same emotions that people who are having these large outbursts are having, but they have the ability to feel them, acknowledge them, and keep their composure throughout it. The third pillar of really highly emotionally intelligent people is social awareness. And I have a few things that fall under this pillar. The first one is the ability to read people really well. And fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to word this can actually be a little bit of a trauma response. If you grew up in a household with a lot of conflict, or you had somebody who had really unpredictable moods and would get very emotional or very angry or have these very large outbursts kind of at the drop of a hat. So going back to these people who lack the regulation to compose themselves when they're really feeling emotionally triggered, you may have had somebody like that in your family who would have these really large outbursts, for kind of disproportionate reasons. And because of that, kind of as a safety response for you as a child in that situation, you develop the ability to pick up on very, very small shifts in tone, in wording, in body language. Any minor shift in what is going on that may potentially signal a change in emotion, you're picking up on that. So you may see this a lot with people who had kind of emotionally unstable people in their lives when they were growing up. But that's not to say that those are the only people who have this skill. There are just some people who are really attuned to the people around them. And even though they may not have grown up around people who had very unstable moods, they still have this skill really dialed in, right? They're very attuned to the people around them. They almost understand how someone is feeling before the person even vocalizes it, right? You almost pick up on their energy and you know what's going on. So this is a sign of someone who's really emotionally intelligent, is that you're able to pick up on all those really small, subtle cues and piece them together in your own mind to understand what is going on with the other person. The next part of this kind of social awareness pillar is the ability to make people feel understood. And again, we probably all know somebody like this, right? It's the people that you feel the safest opening up to. It's the people that, without even meaning to, you're kind of divulging your deepest secrets and challenges and everything to them because they just make you feel so seen and validated and understood. They have this kind of really innate ability to create a safe space for you, right? And again, this kind of ties into having the ability to pick up on how other people are feeling, because these people can pick up on your subtle cues and understand how you're feeling and kind of create a space for you to express yourself in a way that's going to be beneficial. And so it all kind of feeds into each other. And the last part of this, which again kind of feeds into the larger net of social awareness and being able to connect with others, is that they're able to understand different perspectives really easily. Even though someone may have a perspective or an opinion on something that isn't exactly the same as theirs, they're able to step into your shoes for a minute and try to understand it from your perspective, right? These are the people who while they may not agree with you, are still able to validate the way that you're feeling. These are people who have a lot of empathy, people who have a really strong ability to understand where you're coming from, or at least have the open-mindedness to try. And again, this is probably something that you can recognize a lot in the people around you. You probably know what people you can go to and easily open up about your opinions without feeling judged or criticized. Even if you know they don't agree with you, even if you know they have a different stance on something, you know that they're going to still give you the space to speak your truth, and they're still going to make you feel heard. And I think on the flip side, we also probably know some people in our life that have a really hard time doing this, right? That are not able to see any perspective aside from their own. And so when you try to share something with them that doesn't match their worldview in some sort of way, they're very quick to shut it down, right? They don't have the open-mindedness to hear you out. They don't care to hear your reasoning. They don't care to understand where you're coming from. It's not their worldview, and therefore they don't agree with it and they don't want to hear it, right? And I think you can already kind of feel what the experience is talking to somebody like that, where it sounds like where it feels like your opinions and input is just immediately shut down. And there's no space for understanding. There's no space for a more nuanced discussion. There's no open-mindedness from the other person. And so this is often not the kind of person that you go to open up about your thoughts and your feelings and your challenges, right? So you see how all of these kind of social awareness pieces, they all feed into each other, right? When someone is able to easily pick up on your subtle changes in tone and body language, they're able to easily put themselves in your shoes and see where you're coming from, or at least be willing to try. It creates an environment where it feels very safe to talk to them. Those safe space people, the ones that always make you feel heard and understood no matter what's going on, those are the ones that have a high level of emotional intelligence. Moving into the fourth pillar of people with a high level of emotional intelligence, this is mastery of communication. And again, I've got two pieces to this pillar, if you will. So the first one is exactly what it sounds like, good communication skills, right? They're able to express themselves easily. They're able to get their point across in a really clear and concise manner. They're able to be honest with you without sounding super harsh. They're able to be kind and maybe understand you if you have differing opinions from them without sounding fake. They're able to be direct with you without sounding aggressive. They've kind of mastered the art of communication, right? Because there is a certain level of skill to speaking to people in ways that gets your point across, gets the emotion across without being offensive or rude or fake or undermining. Like there really is an art to it. And people with a high level of emotional intelligence have this dialed in, right? These are the people who are able to communicate really well. And again, this is a skill, right? If you're listening to this and you're wanting to improve your emotional intelligence and you're wanting to improve your communication skills, but you feel like this is a place where you're lacking, this, just like anything else, is a skill. This is something you can practice at and improve on over time. So if this is something that maybe you're listening to and you're thinking, that doesn't really sound like me, I'm not the best communicator right now, doesn't mean you never will be. You can get better at that. The second part of this pillar of communication is about how people handle conflict. And people with a high level of emotional intelligence have a very unique way of handling conflict. Because when they are engaged in conflict with somebody else, the goal is not to win, right? The goal is not to win the argument. The goal is not to deflect blame onto somebody else. The goal is to find a solution. This is very much those people where when you're in an argument with them or you're engaged in some sort of conflict with them, it's not you versus them. It's you and them versus the problem, right? They're much more able to see the bigger picture in the situation and address what really is the issue instead of just trying to deflect blame onto you and make you feel like crap. And they're also able to do this typically in a much more composed way, right? These are the people who, when you get into some sort of conflict with them, it ends up leaning more on the side of being a mature conversation more so than something that's been extremely escalated. And that's not to say that there's not an emotional component to this, right? Because I think we all get emotional when we're engaged in conflict. So that's not to say that these people are just going to be like stone-faced, no emotion the whole time, right? They may cry, they may be upset, but it's not those like crazy temper tantrum outburst kind of things. It's a much more controlled presentation of their emotion. And again, as I'm explaining that, I'm sure you know people that fall into both of those camps where on one hand, you may know people where if you engage in an argument with them, they are just trying to beat you, right? They are trying to win the argument. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to beat you down. They're trying to make you feel wrong. They may scream at you. They may name call. They may have these really large emotional outbursts. And these are the people where it feels really difficult to engage in conflict with them, right? Because it almost leaves you both worse off than when you started. There's no real solution here. They just beat you down until you concede to their narrative. Whereas people who are really emotionally intelligent are going to feel the same emotions, right? They're going to feel the same anger and sadness and annoyance and all of the things. They're going to feel all the things, but they're going to stop and recognize that there is a bigger problem at hand, and they're going to be able to see the bigger picture and seek out to address that instead of just beating you down. And so it can feel much easier to engage in conflict with people like this because they have a deeper understanding of A, their own emotions, and B, what is really the task at hand. And the very last pillar of high emotional intelligence, and this is one that often gets overlooked, is strong emotional boundaries. These are the people who can say no without feeling guilty, but can also say no without being mean. They know when to draw the line to protect their own peace, while also being mindful of the feelings of other people. They're not people-pleasing. They're not being aggressive and rude. But they do have strong boundaries in place in order to take care of themselves. Again, this is something that there's an art to it, right? There is an art to protecting yourself while still being mindful of others, and people with a high level of emotional intelligence have this very dialed in. And this is one of those ones that can kind of feed into everything else, right? This is kind of a cohesive ecosystem of emotional intelligence because they all feed into each other. So when you're someone who has really strong emotional boundaries and you have really concrete systems in place to protect your peace and take care of yourself, you have more space and ability to process your own emotions, give yourself the time that you need, give yourself the self-care that you need. And so the space in which you would gain a deeper understanding of your emotions and maybe reflect on how you're showing up and communicating with others and all of the kind of background thought that goes into how people with a high level of emotional intelligence are showing up, having strong boundaries gives you the space to do that, right? It is almost like the nucleus of you being able to do all these other things, because if you have very poor emotional boundaries and you are taking on everybody else's stuff and you're not making space for yourself and you're not putting your own needs on your list anywhere, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to start to resent the people around you because you've taken on too much of their stuff, and you're going to create a system where pressure keeps building and building and building. And this can be one of those things that leads to those really big emotional outbursts because there's been all these little things stacking up and not getting addressed. So you having those boundaries is like giving yourself the chance to open that release valve and process everything that's going on. Okay? So, listening to these 5 pillars, where do you stack up? Maybe there's one or two that you're really strong at. Maybe there's one that you know is a weak point for you. Maybe all of these are things that you think that you could improve on in some capacity. Or maybe you feel like you've mastered them all. And again, everything in this episode is a skill that can be improved. If you're someone who feels like you're really lacking in the emotional intelligence department, you can put in work to fix that. And just like people can improve their general intelligence over time, you can improve your emotional intelligence. And so if you're someone who feels like you're struggling in this department, this is not to make you feel bad or guilty or like you're not capable. This is actually to give you kind of a roadmap, right? This gives you a list of things that you can now focus on and work on improving. And it's also just kind of interesting, right? It's interesting to see where you land on these 5 pillars, because I think a lot of times these are things that heavily impact the way that we show up in our world every day. But they're things that we may not necessarily pay a lot of attention to, right? They're things that we may not even realize are going on in the background and directing the way that we operate. So, interesting to dive into. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll catch you next time.